Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. My guest today is Gabriela Pulido, who is the founder of scAlto, a creative consulting agency that serves niche markets. Gabi understands how difficult it is for firms to scale their business models. She created a framework called the xAlto program that helps B2B companies grow over time without exponential costs. Focusing in on the Hispanic and Latin American market, scAlto is helping businesses grow from a branding and communications perspective. Gabriela has worked with major household names such as Nestle, Insignio, and the Miami Symphony Orchestra, just to name a few. So this is going to be a real exciting conversation today. Gabriela, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to
Well,
the show.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the one big tip.
Thank you. So I want to zoom in here about first of all about your background. You know how you got to be so awesome today, and also I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about the niche markets that you serve. Right, because as I told you in the pre-call, like I've also lived in Latin and South America for a little bit, and I've seen a little bit of the differences between like how things are marketed in Mexico versus Brazil or Argentina, or even to the Hispanic market here in the U.S. Right, and I find that there are some pretty big differences that you need to keep in mind. Tell me a little bit about your business and how you make it so awesome.
So thanks. So the idea of having a one company or a one nation company is different. I mean, as you said, my background coming from Latin America, I was born and raised in Venezuela. Then I lived in New York, and then I came back and currently in Miami. The basis or the background comes from, or my background comes from trying to help solve problems creatively. And the way we connect and communicate in different spaces or different geographies is you have to understand who you're talking to and what your problem you're solving for. And when I started off, I started in branding, and then I pivoted. Once I migrated to Miami, I pivoted towards more in scaling companies, just because I think coming into the realm of growing and the essence of the business of things and what it's actually hurting the company or the entrepreneur came about more naturally to me, and that way. And you went and you also were in Mexico. I have worked in Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, and all the regions, and every country, every company within that has a definite need or a particular aspect or angle, and that you need to understand. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. One of the interesting buzzwords that I heard, when I was exploring, how things are marketed differently, not only across the United States, but also, across the region, is that you're not necessarily translating a message, you are transcreating one. Right. And, when you get into the mode of transcreation, right, where you're actually localizing it, not just for language, but also for regional differences and things like that can really be a differentiating factor for for companies as they're moving into those markets, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you were in Mexico. You say aguacate in Venezuela, but you say avocado in other countries. It's the same fruit or the same piece, but it's called completely different. Even concepts, even constructs. So you need to really hone in into what is happening in that market and make it a statement that actually connects. And for me, I'm super curious about what it makes a difference. So what are the levers you can pull in order to achieve the objectives that the company has, and you were mentioning that I particularly go into the B2B play with fintechs or financial services companies, and that's particularly hard in terms of getting to the right, who are you talking to and what is their pain points, what's hurting, what keeps them up at night, what's happening, and might be different, and they would go here in the US, they would generalize, oh, the Hispanics. No, there's not such thing as like one runoff Hispanics. No, there are nuances, and one of the things, for instance, in Latin America, it's very common to have like the politics of things. It's very complex politics, and so the rule of law, most likely they're going to challenge it, or they're not going to trust it. So how does that translate into your savings or your account? So you need to get into what's happening into that market, what's happening to that person, and what stage they're at, because it also changes. And then that message is actually, you can, like you're saying, create or yeah, the co-create with them the message that you need to deliver.
One of the biggest things that was interesting for me, living in the region was the whole idea of people's relationships with some of the tangible or intangible things that we live with every day. So, for example, here in the United States, we definitely have a different relationship with money, with currency, than you would in country. And that's, and then when you break that down, we're not just talking about different socioeconomic factors. We're talking about all kinds of different ways, that people can actually use it. So, for example, in Brazil, my wife can buy anything and break it apart into 10 payments, right?
Right.
Which is something we just can't do here, in the US. Like if I just, if I walk into the store, go, make 10 payments, they're going to look at me like, what is this? We don't offer that, or go get your own credit card and you're done. Right. And there are
Yeah.
other places as well, where you really need to understand, what financial services are available, so that you can get people to relate to them. Right. And that's how you get these, and that really helps you in creating your promotions and making things seem cheaper than they really are, simply because, that's the way it's being presented to the consumer.
Well, absolutely. Now you're saying it. It's just like once you're there, all the things we take for granted in the U.S., that they don't happen there. You're talking about financials, medicine. There are many different realms of things that you take for granted here. That you have water, you have electricity, you have internet access, and maybe not. Maybe you do. The thing is, what's surprising for me, it's amazing. I always get on in terms of how we manage to overcome those difficulties and even leapfrog and solutions are multiple payments. You're saying payment options, you're saying digital currency adoptions, you're saying all the things that are happening in our markets, that is way farther ahead from what's happening in the US or first world countries. And you see that out of necessity. You see many things, and from my end, in terms of communications and consulting, it's just like, okay, how might you see the growth options? Yes, you see trends in the US, yes, you see trends in Europe, but then you see things within the country. The entrepreneurial spirits is happening in Chile, in Colombia, and Venezuela even. You see things happening that you say, oh my God, this is amazing how you can solve like a Rappi in Colombia, and you see Mercado Libre in Argentina. You see things happening way ahead of their time. And that's exciting, because then you become like a citizen of a world, as opposed to Latin or Hispanic. You see how you might adopt different trend or different things that you can accomplish or you can introduce into your business model, and then you can scale from that.
Amazing. Yeah. I am endlessly fascinated every time I travel, or even, like where we live in South Florida, right? A lot of the culture down here is bilingual, right? So you'll see billboards in Spanish, right? As you're driving down I-95, you'll see, like different advertisements where where they will be either hyper targeted or moderately targeted, towards the population that lives here, right? And they could be very different than what you see in the Northeast or in the Midwest, things like that.
Absolutely. And even that what we're living, it's the Miami tech scene, what's happening, all the people that are coming in. I've been here for 5 years, and the transformation of Miami has been amazing. But then you also see people coming from Chicago, New York, and you see coming here, it's like you need to speak Spanish. I mean, in order to be in Miami, there's an absolute need to understand Spanish, or understand the nuances of this culture, because they call this the capital of Latin America, for some reason, because there's a joint culture system of many countries happening here, and the Latin aspect is big. But then again, you see companies from, like, say, Colorado trying to come in here, and they trying to understand it. We want to get into the Hispanics. Okay, Hispanics here are more Latin, and this is a different aspect. It might be third or fourth generation in, but then you also see first generation into the U.S. So there are different nuances that we need to take care of. But yeah, I don't know what's your take on the Miami tech scene?
What's interesting is that now we have our Mayor Suarez, who is all in on Bitcoin, and he's actually establishing Miami as the Bitcoin capital of the world. So we now have the Miami Bull. Take that, New York, right? So it's
Right.
it looks like this Transformers looking crypto bull. So it's actually really cool. And what's interesting is that like the ecosystem of what is appearing here locally, right, is really starting to balloon. I think part of it, part of it is like this used to be the best kept secret, in the U.S.
Right.
Like, why would you pay astronomical prices to live in San Jose, California, when you could buy a really big house over here in Miami for about the same price? That's changing, by the way. But it is definitely nicer to live here than in other places around the US. And I think it's easier. I think, it's like if you need to go to the Northeast, where the financial capitals really still are, it's a much easier flight than coming from the West Coast. I think we're geographically very well positioned. And also I think it's a better creative environment. It can really help you open up and, think differently, especially when you're exposed to all these different cultures all at once, as opposed to living into some, homogenous community where you have to read about these different cultures as opposed to living it.
Right. I mean, for me, has been amazing in terms of I'm part of the Endeavor mentor. I'm a mentor at the Endeavor, and to see the evolution of it, the level of entrepreneurship that's happening these 5 years. That's not about 10 years. It's not only like 2 or 3 years happening. It's booming. It's thrilling. If you go to Wynwood, if you go to the NFT conference that they had 2 weeks, or I don't know, a month ago, and you see everything that's happening. There's a vibe. There's people excited, optimism, despite our word recession. That people are coming. This is different. And from the other end, from my world, from Latin America coming in, because I also help a lot of companies coming in from Colombia and Latin America. Even German companies want to come into the to Florida market, is understanding what is happening. That nuance that you can't. It's not a one blanket solution. You need to understand what target are you going to, and who are you, what problem you're solving. And that was good. It's a good approach to being here and experience it. It's amazing. So for me, it's great.
I want to segue. I want to segue deeply into that point, because you have you created a framework that helps companies articulate, and understand what it takes in order to brand and and to communicate, within these markets. Can you talk a little bit about it? About, like, what's involved? Like, what are the main points? Like, how can companies really, how can they pivot their communication so that they are talking correctly to these markets, as opposed to just talking blind and seeing what sticks?
So the other way to approach this is, when do clients come to me? So come to us and help. Like they don't have a clear north. They don't know where they're heading, or they have this narrow-minded or direct, laser-focused solutions, and they're not looking into what are the growth options they have. So that's, for us, it's like, okay, once you're there, we have this program that we can help you with, which is trying to articulate what is your growth strategy, what is your scaling mindset, and then most likely you're going to know what's your why? It's in vogue that Simon Sinek had widely popularized the concept of what's your purpose, what's your why. We help companies understand that. Once you get that, you understand where you're growing. That gives you leverage. It's like, how do you magnify your vision? And it's like, okay, this is what where I'm heading, and everybody knows. Jeff, it's amazing. Every time companies come here and then maybe they want to go be everything to everybody. No, you have to narrow it down. And that's our first pillar of our xAlto program. Once you know where you're heading and you have your scaling mindset in place, then you go, what's your narrative? What's your story? What are you telling? How are you telling? How are you embracing that communication into home? And from that, we go in the thought leadership. We understand what are the concepts, what are the levers, what is your key pillars of communication that you should have. And then you analyze whether your brand is in sync or not with your narrative and with your story and with your growth opportunities you're foreseeing. So maybe there is an evolution of your brand, transformation, or even refreshment of your brand. But not only your logo, because for many, many years, brand has been an equivalent of logo. It's much more than that. It's your identity, it's your name, it's your colors, it's your typography, it's your messaging, it's your website, it's all the things that you know how to do also, Jeff. But then once we have that, we go into, okay, what is your marketing strategy? Where are you heading? And then we go and see once you have that narrative, you say, okay, what's your journey? What's your experience? And that customer journey, that's obviously very, very much popularized. But for me, it's once you have a mindset of having the journey in sync or the journey without broken links, then you actually have your statement, where you're heading, your narrative, your story in sync with what your customer is experiencing. So that's in a nutshell, that's our program.
What a great way to articulate it, right? Because really what you're doing is that you're leading you're leading them down a path that makes it easy to understand what it is that you're going to do and how you're going to implement that. Can you talk a little bit about some successes that you've had with this? Like like, I don't know if you can name a company, but maybe just illustrate for us, like a case study where a company did approach you. You were able to help them, start at point A and get to point B, in a successful fashion.
Yeah. The good thing about it is that I can talk about what successes and what we've gone through. So, for instance, Mercantile Bank, I don't know if it was a bank in South Florida. Home based was initially in Venezuela, and they had to pivot. They had to change to a local to being the U.S. based company. And they called us and said, okay, what's their strategy? Where should they go? And the strategy was we turned it into a community bank, more in a community bank, servicing the community with the values and trying to translate and transfer the values that they had as a corporate, many 100+ years in Venezuela. So the idea coming into the US, we did the whole strategy, and then we went and figure out, okay, what is the one thing that we need to change? We need to change the name, the identity, because it needed to portray more of the community bank in terms of South Florida and Texas. So we changed the name, going to Amaranth Bank, and we changed the whole experience as to how would you streamline. Yes, you had the cafecito event before, but now how you translate that culture into these new markets. That's one of the projects, and it was nearly done in less than 9 months, which is great. Another program that we're currently working with is a prop fintech company called eStating, and they're coming in. It's very targeted into financial and wealth financial advisors in terms of having this concept, new concept into this platform, into the real estate, exclusive real estate, and putting this into the scene of making it accessible to smaller scale financial advisors in terms of what is the offering, what is the property and the tech side of it in place. So we're doing that. activating in different channels, and with exactly the same thing. We're doing what is the thought leadership, what are the concepts, what are the constructs, what are the pillars, and from then we transfer that into the different channels and activating that. So it's been success. They've been super happy and pretty successful at it. And there are many others. Insignio, which you mentioned at the beginning, which is also a wealth management firm. And we're doing a NFT platform generating NFTs for influencers. And we're doing, it's a realm of things that the beauty of this, our blueprint, our program is it can be brought into companies willing to scale. It's not for companies willing to close down Chapter 11. No, it's companies that have they don't understand what are the levers to scale. And we do actually, with our framework, with our way of connecting the dots, we get into the right strategy, narrative, and experience.
What a great story to tell, that you're able to help all these companies, be able to pivot, to change from especially from a Latin American focused bank into a very American focused community bank. I thought that was particularly interesting. I didn't even know that Amaranth had its roots in Mercantile. So, I remember both at I remember seeing the first one and, just wondering, well, what happened to that? Well, they must have got bought up. So, but then, just knowing that now it's a pivot is actually very interesting. And the branding, you see it all over the place here, is actually very powerful. So, that's something very visual, that you're able to see on your work, even when you're driving down the freeway and
Absolutely.
you're able to see, your work up on a billboard like that. So that's great. Gabby, can you please let everyone know how they can learn more about your company and how they can reach out to you directly?
So we have our website, scalto.com. You can reach me at LinkedIn, also Gabriela Pulido. You can reach me, and here also at Scalto, there's a WhatsApp channel that we can access any questions. And the thing is that we can activate very easily scalability assessment for your company or for your stage where you're at, and we can give you insights as to, at the very beginning, to understand what are the levers you can pull in terms of where can be your action points faster to get into the scaling mode on.
Amazing stuff. Gabby, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. I love nerding out on this stuff, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with the audience about some of the successes that your firm has been involved with. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you too. Best of luck.